welcome back to Harbour Unboxed. We are at the G.Skill booth at Computex 2026 and we have a few interesting products here all relating to Ryzen. So perhaps those of you who are on AM4, obviously you're holding out with your DDR4 memory, but if DDR5 pricing does improve next year, who knows, I'm not making any promises about that. But when pricing does improve, the things we're about to look at will be relevant. They'll be useful things for you. Some of it is extra low latency or ultra low latency memory. But before we get to that, and before we even look at this actively cooled memory, I want to come to the Neo X. So we looked at these last year from G.Skill. They had a few wild colors. Unfortunately, it looks like the orange and greens, they were very vibrant. They looked amazing. You guys liked them. It seems like they're not bringing those crazy color modules to market. And even the gloss white isn't coming. We get the matte finish instead, which I think I prefer. It absorbs the RGB lighting a bit better. They glow, they look pretty good. We can sort of see them in a system behind me, which we'll look at. But yeah, these are the new Neo XRGB memory modules. So this is the matte white version. How'd they have that like that? And then it comes also in a matte black, which I think looks really neat. Not too bad with fingerprints, the matte ones. But if you do like your fingerprints, they also have, this is already covered in fingerprints, but you can wipe that before you put it back in your system. So that's the piano black or gloss black, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, they're all RGB, obviously, because it's the Neo X RGB memory. Now, some other new memory that we'll take a look at is the active cooling technology. So this is a collaboration with Cooler Master. Also, if you're hearing some loud pitched squealing noises in the background, nobody's strangling Balin. They're doing some LN2 overclocking. So they're letting some of that out of the bottles. I'm imagining that's what we're hearing. So a lot of that's going on. Hopefully the mics aren't picking it up because it's very, very loud. But we'll push on. So this is a collaboration with Cooler Master, and it is actively cooled DDR5 memory. So those who overclock push their memory pretty hard. These DDR5 does have a tendency to run very hot, and this is one way of addressing that. Possibly not the most practical in terms of compatibility, because you will require a 4-DIMM motherboard like what we have here, and you will only be able to install 2 modules, which honestly, that's what most people do, especially in the current economy. But overclocking memory and those who like to push the memory generally use dual DIMM motherboards. And these modules, or this configuration won't work on those boards. So overclocking memory that doesn't really work on overclocking motherboards, bit of an odd combination there, but they are working on a slimmer, low profile version that will work in the dual DIMM overclocking motherboards. So for those of you, those mad overclockers out there, it seems like you will get a version of this that will work on the overclocking focus boards. Now, G.Skill aren't selling these directly. You'll purchase these via, as I understand it, Cooler Master kits. So perhaps you'll buy a kit with like a cooler case, not quite sure, and then they'll provide the memory in it. But depending on popularity, demand, all that sort of stuff, it could be a product in the future that G.Skill bring to their own lineup. So we'll have to see how that all plays out. Now, one of the few actually interesting announcements that AMD made at Computex this year is their Expo ultra low latency memory. Essentially, the SPD settings or timings that you can write to the memory is very limited for AMD. So G.Skill's been pushing AMD to give them more programmable timings for their memory, leaving less reliance on the motherboard manufacturers, that G.Skill can have programmed into their memory that when you load Expo, those timings will load up on any memory that's, well, it'll load up on any motherboard rather, and it should work, especially providing that that motherboard has been validated to work with that memory. And so far they have 4 different memory kits with the new ultra low latency feature. So they're all DDR5 6000 kits, which obviously makes sense for the AM5 platform. We've got a CL26 kit, CL28, 36 and 30. But it's the secondary, tertiary timings that have been improved with these kits, and we'll go over that now. Okay, so let's talk in more detail about what AMD's Expo ultra low latency or Expo UL is. Simply put, it's a new memory profile standard that's being introduced as part of the Expo 1.2 update. It builds upon AMD's existing Expo technology to offer even tighter memory timings. And we've heard for years now how you can typically push memory further with Intel CPUs, and we're not just talking about the clock speeds here, but also the degree to which you can manually adjust the memory timings. This has been a problem for AMD overclocking, as the Ryzen IMC generally finds its sweet spot. We've found at much lower frequencies when compared to what Intel can do, somewhere in the range of 6,000 to 6,400 MTS, while the Intel CPUs can enjoy performance improvements beyond, say, 8,000 MTS. So in an effort to address this, Expo ULL aims to drastically reduce latency at sweet spot frequencies by around 5 to 7 nanoseconds. And they've done this by allowing memory module makers like G.Skill to tighten up the subtimings, such as TREFI, TRRDS, and TRW. Now, TREFI is the refresh interval, and this has been drastically increased. By extending the time between mandatory memory refreshes, the RAM spends less time locked down doing maintenance and more time actively processing CPU requests, which is a massive contributor to lower latencies. TWR is the write recovery time. This timing is tightened or lowered, improving how quickly the memory can transition from a write operation to a pre-charge command. Then the third new option that memory manufacturers can adjust is the TRRDS, and this represents the RAS to RAS delay short. This subtiming is reduced to allow faster consecutive row activations within the same bank group. And then there is a fourth SPD setting that can be adjusted, and that is the VDDP voltage. By locking the VDDP voltage setting, companies like G.Skill can ensure stability for the memory controller and Ryzen processors when running these more aggressive subtimings. Now, AMD claims that Expo ULL can boost gaming performance over previous Expo configurations by 4% for non-X3D CPUs like the Ryzen 7 9700X. So given that, we can assume there will be next to no improvement for those of you with X3D CPUs, at least for most games, which isn't really shocking given that we know X3D CPUs typically aren't very memory sensitive. And I should just point out that you will see some claims, or you're likely to see some claims, that are suggesting performance gains will be in the 10 to 15% region, but be aware these claims are comparing Expo ULL with the base JetX speeds. So it's not a relevant comparison. The actual gains across a wide range of games are going to be more like 4%, and that's what G.Skill is showing here. Now, of course, the performance gains will depend on the memory used, as the memory module makers are free to use whatever timings they see fit, or at least validate. So you might see some very aggressively tuned modules that will only be validated to work with a handful of motherboards. I've been told the 4 G.Skill kits on display here are tuned more for compatibility than outright performance. Finally, please note you will require a motherboard BIOS update to use Expo ULL. BIOS revisions based on a GSA 1.3.0.1 or later will add the ability to enable ULL. They have a DDR5 10933 kit working, or at least the kit's working at that frequency. And this is with a Core Ultra 5 250K plus. It's a 48GB kit, so two 24GB sticks. It's obviously CU-DIMM memory. Now, as impressive as the frequency is, and it does show what can be achieved, this isn't offering really any additional performance. It's probably slower than some of the kits we've already tested that run at lower ratios. So this would almost certainly be like a Gear 4 ratio, which kills your latency and therefore not great for gaming performance, but it is good for achieving large bandwidths. In our Core Ultra 7 270K Plus review, we talked about the 4R CU-DIMM support that was now being offered by these updated 200 series processors from Intel. Now, these modules here are 128GB in capacity. So we've got just 2 sticks in this particular system, 256GB of memory. No idea how much that would cost. G.Skill said they haven't even been able to work out the price yet. They're probably still adding up the zeros, but yeah, pretty crazy DDR5 8000 kit there, 2 sticks and 256GB of RAM. And wrapping up our coverage here at the G.Skill booth, we have stumbled across this DDR5 8800 enabled system, Intel Xeon thing, but it has 768GB of memory, which is truly insane. I don't even want to know how much this thing costs. So rather than find out, I think we're just going to end the video there. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the new memory modules that we should be seeing from G.Skill soon. And I am actually pretty keen to test out that ultra low latency memory and see what kind of performance we can get in our own testing. So thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next video.